few weeks ago, I started sharing with you about what I feel God is saying for 2020. And we talked about the fact that probably more than any other time that I can remember, there are prophetic words out there of what God is going to do in 2020. How many have at least heard one prophecy? How many have gotten inundated with emails? And how many have seen Sid Ross' video? You can go to YouTube and see Sid Ross' video on the 20 things that God is saying for 2020. And he's got 20 different leaders. Some of them, you know, our own Clarice Fluitt has one on there, and she had 20 of the nation's top leaders sharing what the Lord was saying to them for 2020. And what's ironic about it is that almost everything they say is different. Like you could get confused. Is God schizophrenic or something? Or can God not make up his mind? Or, how is it possible that God could tell us this year we're going north, and we're going to go south, and we're going to go east, and we're going to go west? I mean, how is that even possible, right? How many know what I'm talking about? Just seems like all these different things. This is the year of favor, and this is the year of breakthrough, and this is, the year you get a new house, and this is the year you get a new car, or whatever. I mean, it's mind-blowing, isn't it? Well, I feel like that God showed me this, and I shared it a couple Sundays ago. The answer is yes. It's all going to happen. Now, truthfully and practically, everything is not going to happen to everyone. Because we are a family, we're a body, right? How many have already graduated from high school? Okay, well, if the prophetic word is you're going to graduate from high school, how many know that's already happened for some of you? But there's some in the room who are in a valley of decision on whether or not they ever will graduate from high school, and they might be 30 years old and have never graduated, and all of a sudden it sparks in them, hey, God just says I'm graduating from high school, and they graduate. Am I communicating? And there are people in this room that you've had prophetic promise in your life, and it just hasn't happened. It's been hindered, it's been held back. Or how many have ever made some wrong choices that caused you to have to circle back around and do something again? How many have ever felt like somehow you wound up in plan B or plan C? Reinhard Bonnke was sharing one time. I was in this minister's meeting, and he was sharing about how one day he was in prayer, and he was really grateful to God. I mean, millions of people being swept into the kingdom of God. And he was saying, God, thank you for choosing me. I'm just humbled by the fact that you chose me. And the Holy Spirit said, well, you weren't my first choice. Now that right there will humble you major, big time, right? You weren't my first choice. As a matter of fact, you were third. Two other people either could not obey the voice of the Lord, or would not obey the voice of the Lord, or would not pay the price. He did, and God gave the assignment to him. So I can just tell you, I know that there are certain things in my life that I'm fulfilling something that was assigned to somebody else. And in some cases, maybe my own father. And in his case, there was adversity that he could not deal, he just couldn't overcome. And now I've taken that ball and ran with it. Been in 23 countries, around the world 35 times, and even preached in a Russian country. And he was called to Russia and never got to really go and preach. So you understand that sometimes God uses you to fulfill a calling in your family or someone else who, for whatever reason, could not fulfill that promise. Am I communicating? Our church, Ignited Church, we have an incredible destiny ahead of us. It's an incredible destiny. The problem is that to try and define it puts us in a position of saying, God, this is the way I want you to do it. By default, that's what we're doing sometimes when we try to declare this is what God's going to do. As a matter of fact, Jesus said things like, take no thought for tomorrow. Let tomorrow take care of itself. Tomorrow's got enough problems. Take care of today. Proverbs says, don't go into another city and say, I'm going to build this business and I'm going to do that and I'm going to accomplish it. No, just as the Lord leads, as the Lord's will, we will do these things. And there's this constant divine tension between having the word of faith, thus saith the Lord, and over here on this side, as the Lord wills. I'm trusting God. I believe that this is what I'm supposed to do. This is where I'm going. Amen? Because none of us has any promise of tomorrow. Now, we just buried Ruth Schofield, long time associate of this church. When she was just a young lady, we sent her to Washington, D.C. to be an ambassador there for the Christian Embassy. And she's been there how many years, Linda? 35? 33 years she was up in Washington, D.C. And we just buried her Friday. She wasn't supposed to do that. She's not supposed to be in the ground today. She had more books to write. She had more TV shows to do. She had more things to accomplish. I can't tell you why she's in the grave this morning. But I tell you this, those mantles, those callings, those giftings are there now to be placed on someone else. And Ruth will be up there in heaven along with my mom, because my mom and Ruth were very close. And Ruth will be cheering them on. Amen? And there are times when somehow the enemy is allowed to get in there and cause defeat or destruction or detour. And I can't explain all that to you. I just know my job is to fight. My job is to pray. My job is to fast. My job is to seek wise counsel. My job is to seek the face of God and deal with stuff. That's my job. And it's my responsibility for me, for my family, and for you. But I can't be your Holy Spirit. You got to do it for yourself. So, what I have done this morning is I pulled together some prophetic promises that God has given to us as a church. And one of the things that we have learned about the prophetic is that you have to do war with it. You have to war with the promises of God. And what do I mean by that? Lord, you promised that you would never leave me nor forsake me. You promised that if I made you my shepherd, you'd lead me to green pastures. You would anoint my head with oil. My cup would run over. Goodness and mercy would follow me all the days of my life. Now, you got to do it with the right attitude, tone of voice. We don't need to be a bunch of entitled brats. We are sons and daughters of the Most High. Right? And there is some royal prerogatives, responsibilities, privileges, but there has to be some decorum and there has to be some sacrifice. How many know that, how many moms we got here today? How many know that you had to put your kids first, sometimes to your own hurt? Have you seen that TV commercial where the mom comes in and stands at the door? She's got a really bad cold, and she said, I'm so sorry, Billy. Mom's got to take the day off. And Billy's just laying there in bed looking at her. Moms don't get a day off, right? Come on, moms, let me hear an amen. And there are times when we have to bull force our way through. I didn't say bull twinkle. I said bull force our way through. And it's tough. I don't know who told you that once you became a Christian, life became easy. As a matter of fact, I hate to tell you, it's going to get tougher. It's going to be harder. The good news is God puts a turbo engine in you to climb every mountain. You can go anywhere with this turbo engine in you. You're full of God. You've got God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit in you. You need wisdom, ask. If you need something, knock at the door and keep on knocking. And the door will be open to you. Seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, His way of doing things and being right. And all the things that you worry about, they'll all be taken care of. Jesus said those words with His own mouth. Whatever you need, ask. My Father, which is in heaven, He'll give it to you. There was no limitations, limits. There was no, anything goes. Now, obviously, if your 12-year-old walks up to you and asks you for the keys to the car, hey, Dad, want to go down, take some friends, go to the movies, you're not going to give him the keys. Number one, it's illegal. Number two, he'll probably kill himself or kill somebody. Right? Come on. So, your Heavenly Father knows what you have need of. And if you ask for a fish, He's not going to give you a serpent. But at the same time, we have the responsibility to ask. The responsibility to say, God, it's in your word. You promised. Help me to bring myself into alignment. Help me to do my part. I wanted to drive the car, but I had to go through the process of getting a driver's license in order to have the privilege of driving the car. Are you with me? And I had to satisfy for a whole year. I had to drive with my dad sitting in the front seat. I had to convince him for a whole year that I was mature enough to drive. Am I communicating? So there is process to getting what we want. But even when you go through the process and you do everything right, 6 weeks before I got my driver's license, I don't know why I'm telling on myself. I'm just throwing myself under the bus. But 6 weeks before I got my driver's license, I got on a little mini bike. How many even know what a mini bike is? The little tiny miniature motorcycles. I got on one without a helmet, because, it's Florida law. Back then, you had to wear a helmet. I didn't have a helmet. And I was driving down a dirt road. A dirt road. I had no idea that just because it's a dirt road doesn't mean it's not a city road. And I had a policeman just pull up his cruiser right alongside me, and he looks over at me. He says, so I pull over the mini bike, and long story short, I spent the night in juvenile home. And I lost my license for 6 more weeks. So I was delayed 6 more weeks after I turned 16 getting my driver's license. Now, I didn't even know I was breaking the law. I didn't know. But how many know that ignorance doesn't matter? And there are many things that we're going through that we don't have a clue we're doing to our bodies that causes us grief. And one of the jobs that we have as a pastor is to give you the whole counsel of God. I tell you all of the good, the bad, the ugly. I let you know things. And most of the time I'm right. The rest of the time I just think I'm right. That was humor, and you obviously missed it. Now, let's talk about just a few things that God has said to us. God has said that He is rending the heavens over Central Florida. There is literally an open heavens right now. We can almost ask for anything. But, and you will, if you've been alert to it, you've noticed major ministries have been moving to the greater Central Florida area, all the way from Tampa to Daytona, all across Central Florida, major ministries. Benny Hinn's son-in-law, Michael Koulianos, has opened a big ministry school. Daniel Kalinda's opened a big ministry school. There's several others throughout the Orlando, Tampa region. God has poured out His Spirit, and He has His eye on Central Florida, and we're right in the middle of it. There's been a cleansing of the atmosphere. We've walked through it as a congregation. We have repented and asked God to cleanse us as a congregation and individually. But God has said, not only am I rending the heavens, tearing open the heavens, He said, I'm tearing your mantles off of you. Now, this is the one that gets painful and it gets confusing. But the mantles we have been wearing, or thought we were wearing, or maybe thought they were permanent, are being torn and removed, and God is putting new mantles on us. Now, for everybody in the room, that means something different. For some of you, it meant a job change or a career change. For some of you, it meant a geographic change or a church change. For some of you, it meant a relationship change. I mean, everybody in here, it has meant something different. You went back to school, or you took on additional responsibilities. For some of you, took on the responsibility of caring for a parent. I look back here at Mina. Mina, wave your hands. Yeah, just wave your hands. Everybody say hi. Just a few weeks ago, she was in Shanghai, China, where she lives. God told her to sell everything and come to Ignited Church, and here she is. Now, how many think that's a change? Come on, that's a huge change. What was God thinking? Isn't there another church in China? I mean, right now, I don't know what it is now, maybe as many as 20% of Chinese people are underground, but they're born-again believers. God sent me all the way to Baguio, Philippines, way up in the mountains, where I trained and equipped 20 Chinese pastors, all undercover, all in the cloak and dagger. I mean, we were secret, and God sent me all the way there to train them for a week. You talk about humbling. 18 of the 20 of them had already been in jail for preaching the gospel, and here I am, Mr. Florida, suntan, telling them how to pastor their churches. You talk about humbling. It's one of the most humbling things I've ever done in my life. You and I don't have a clue what's about to happen to us. Look at what is happening in the natural. Who would have ever thought that we were within inches on the playing field of overturning Roe versus Wade? Whoever thought that? Whoever thought that in 3 short years, President Trump has totally turned upside down the entire judicial system, and it's all swerving back to traditional biblical family values? Who would have thought that? The corrupt trade agreements. I'm not a financial expert, but I talk to people who are, and they said, you have no idea how corrupt it is. And President Trump doesn't come in and change it. He comes in, throws a hand grenade, blows the whole thing up. And then he makes a better deal with Mexico and Canada. They like more than ever. They love it. Now, I know they run their mouths and, they do that for political reasons. But I'm just telling you, I just talked to an insider this week. They said, man, they are really excited about the new trade agreement. We've been trying to cut a trade deal with China for 40 years. Trump goes in, throws a hand grenade, walks away, it all blows up, and China comes running after him. Oh, wait a minute, we want a deal. Oh, yeah, Iran. Did you know there is a revival in Iran? Some 20%. Just like in China, are giving their hearts to the Lord. You can go onto my dad's Facebook or my Facebook and see thousands of Muslims that are getting baptized in water. Do you understand? When they get baptized in water, they are totally cut off. It's as if they are dead to their family. And they've lined up thousands of them to walk into the ocean and get water baptized. And all of that has happened in the last few years. What is God up to? CNN, one of the strongest voices, but yet it truly was the communist news network. Because it's like putting a lobster on the stove in a cold water pot and then turning up the temperature and let it slowly boil. And that's what the Marxists and the communists have done in our schools and in our media. Totally corrupt. I was standing in my hotel room in Manila, Philippines, and CNN is reporting that thousands were demonstrating in the streets of Manila. And I looked out my window and I go, hey, that's that group of people right outside my window. I'm looking at it on the TV, and I'm looking out there. I can see the trees. I can see the buildings in the background. I was looking at the same shot, same picture. And there was 50 people out there with picket signs, and 50 people! And CNN's lying, saying there were thousands in the streets. It was a camera angle. You got to understand, people. You better know the truth. The truth is going to set you free. Trump comes along, hand grenades, CNN. And now they're falling apart and they can't pay their bills and they're laying off people right and left. And God raised up Fox News, which is predominantly Catholic. And they're holding strong to family values, and they're pro-life, and they're pro-Word of God, and pro-God and country. I'm not promoting one network over another, but I'm trying to tell you, if you open your eyes, you can see what's happening in the natural and understand what God is doing for you. God is totally turning around the whole school system. You ask any one of the teachers here, the school system is shaking down to its core right now. The judicial system. And then Trump is going after the Department of Corrections, and he's hitting them hard, and hopefully my brother's going to be released from prison. We just got to keep praying. Now, God has promised that there is about to become a movement that's coming out of Central Florida like no one has ever seen. And I've known this for about a year. And I found it interesting that even President Trump is using the term "this movement" in reference to what he is doing. I just found it interesting. Where did he get that word from? That's not a political word. It's not political rhetoric. Where did he get that from? And yet God is about to raise up a movement out of us. Right here, we're going to be part of it. But out of Central Florida, that's going to touch the world. And part of that movement is going to be the Jewish people. I don't know, how is that even possible? But a great revival is going to hit Jewish people here in Central and South Florida. I don't even know how that's possible. But God has raised up intercessors in this church that have been praying for Israel and America since my mom started the prayer meeting in the late 60s. And we've been praying for the peace of Jerusalem. Now, there was a man who actually stood here in this pulpit to give one of his little speeches in our God and Country rally a few days ago. And I can't endorse all the different speakers and so forth. It was a political rally that we allowed them to use our building, and they paid rent for it. But he kept saying that America is the new Jerusalem. It is not. America has not replaced Israel. That's called replacement theology, and that's a heresy. Nobody can replace Israel. But God has placed his favor, his hand on America, because it's still on your money. In God we trust. Still part of our Constitution. We have rights because of our Creator. President Trump even said, every child deserves to live because they came from the divine Creator himself. Now, I'm not promoting President Trump. I wish he wouldn't tweet and say bad words, and I wish all of that. But I have to look at the fruit. And as long as he's doing the will of God, my dad used to say, man, if an old hound dog was barking for Jesus, I'd give him a piece of bread. Come on. I don't know what tomorrow's going to look like. I don't know. But what I do know is who holds tomorrow. Now, there is a prophetic dimension that has taken place right here in Lakeland and right in this house, not necessarily the physical house, but you as the congregation. We've identified approximately 11 or 12 moves of God that have gone through our church or were birthed in our church or were moved to our church as a launching pad. How many love worship music? You love worship music. Did you know it did not exist on a global scale till the International Worship Symposium in the 80s came to Carpenter's Home Church, and we launched the International Worship Symposium, and out of that came Integrity Hosanna music, and then out of that came Bethel, and came Australia, and came all the different worship sounds, and now they play worship music on contemporary radio. Joy FM, that was our radio station right here. That was ours. We had 5 radio stations here in Lakeland, Joy FM, Greenville, South Carolina, and 2 others. That was birthed here in this church. CTN, Channel 22, Clearwater, came out of our church. Did you know that? The whole production crew, Paul Garber and the gang, and the Greenlee family, which are now, Paul is still with Channel 22, runs their internet division, and the Greenlees are now doing their programming division, came out of this church. I was hired to come back from Oral Roberts University, where I was working on the television department with Richard and Oral, to take over the television department here because all of our team went there. See, there's all kinds of backstories that you don't even know unless you've been around for a long time. God shifts us and changes us. Jan and I went out to eat with Rodney Howard Brown over here at the Garlic Garden. Some people call it the Olive Garden, but you know it's the Garlic Garden. We have a nice meal together. We walk outside. He turns to Jan and I and says, why don't you take a year leave of absence and travel with me for a year? And let's see what God will do. And I said, as your television producer? Because I just helped him launch his brand new TV series called Chronicles of Revival. I created that. I shot and edited it with our equipment. He said, no, we'll get somebody else to do that. I want you to carry my briefcase. He hired me, full salary, to carry his briefcase. Why? Because God told him that I was an apostle called to the nations, and if I stayed behind the TV camera, I would never step into my calling and destiny. For 7 months, our family traveled with him on the road, and I carried his briefcase and did some other things. And one day, on a Sunday night, 5 minutes before he walked out from behind the door in, what's the name of that little city outside of Dallas? Rockwall, Texas. Rockwall, Texas. 5,000 people out there. And we're standing behind that door that leads onto the platform. We're standing there at the door, and he turns to me and says, I'm letting all the team go. And he said, I think it's time for you to start your ministry. And I said, What? I won't go into the whole story. Some of you know it. Thousands of dollars in debt, making 2 mortgage payments. Not 2 mortgage payments, but 1 mortgage payment and paying for all of our hotel and everything on the road. All of that happening, and at that time, 3 kids. And that evangelist had the nerve to give me 5 days notice. I said, when's my last day? He said, this Friday. He said, don't worry, I got your back, but you're supposed to start now. Within 24 hours, I was booked for the next 3 months, and nobody even asked me if I could preach. They assumed I could preach because I was Carl Strader's son. They assumed. They didn't know I was the television director. I wasn't preaching. I was behind the camera. And I'd only preached a couple of times, and when I did, people begged my dad, please, we love Stephen, but don't let him preach. That's a true story. Ask Paul Cooprider. Wave your hand, Paul. Paul didn't even like me. Ask him, is it true? It's true. Didn't even like me. Now he's served on our board now for 15, 20 years. You've got to understand that when God changes and shifts, you got to change with him. Now, let me close with this, and I didn't even finish page 1. God is going to use us as a sign and a wonder for the entire state of Florida. We're going to be a sign and a wonder. I don't know what that's going to look like. I mean, we've already done it in 1993, and we did it in 2008. What in the world is it going to look like this time? But let me just tell you one thing. God says there's going to bubble up out of the ground a spring of living water. And it's going to bubble out. And it's not going to just bubble here. It's going to bubble up in places all across Florida. There's going to be these bubbling springs. And they're going to be so violent that it's going to break up the ground, and that water is going to start flowing first as streams, then into rivers, and then something unusual is going to happen. Fire from heaven is going to fall on these rivers, and there will be fire on the rivers. It'll be a fire on the water movement. Now, interestingly, Jan and I, the first city God sends us to, when we went from behind the camera to in front of the camera, we left Rodney and went on our own. The first city was Houston, Texas. And the 3rd week, approximately, we were there. The river that flows through the city of Houston went into flood stage. It literally flooded probably a good 1/3 of the entire city. And if any of you know this, Houston is like the, 17th largest city in the world. Something like that. So it's in the top 20. 1/3 is underwater. And we are there doing a revival. We had just moved out of this corporate apartment, moved across town to start a 3rd week at another church, and our apartment that we had just moved out of was underwater all the way to the 2nd floor. And an unusual sign and wonder happened. Chuck Pierce had prophesied months earlier that the Houston River was going to catch on fire, literally. And they said, how in the world is that going to happen? But the flood was so violent that it broke a gas main that went under the water, and the main shot up, caught on fire, and it looked like for miles that the Houston River was on fire as flames shot up off the top of the water. He stood here in 2010, tells that story. Jan and I interrupted him and said, we were there. When that happened, we were there. We actually stopped our revival meetings for 2 days, got the whole church to bring their John boats and their lifeboats and food and clothes and blankets, and we literally rescued a whole subdivision. We were pulling people off the top of cars, out of second-story windows, brought them all to the church, gave them blankets, gave them food, and took care of them, not knowing that none of them spoke English. We had rescued a Latin subdivision. So I turned to the preacher and I said, do we have anybody that can interpret for me? I'll do a little service for him, just bring him a little comfort or whatever. And there was about, 75 people, 80 people that we had rescued that were still there that morning. And the interpreter didn't show up. So I said, is anybody here bilingual? And several of them pointed at this one lady. Now, understand, we've rescued her out of her second-story window in the middle of the night. All she has on is a T-shirt and some little, I don't even think there were pants. I think there were like little shorts or something. No undergarments. And she doesn't want to stand up in front of people because she's not dressed properly. So they put a little blanket around her shoulders. And she just kind of stood kind of almost behind me because she didn't want anybody to look at her. She didn't have any makeup. Her hair's all stringy down in her face, and that was my interpreter. I came to realize that she knew 5 English words. It's kind of like me. My Spanish is Taco Bell, Burrito Supreme, my sermon got reduced to God, good, devil, bad. And 10 people gave their heart to the Lord. I looked around for my interpreter and she was gone. And I said, where did she go? And they said, she had to go out and smoke a cigarette. I got stories, people. But when God shifts you and changes you, it is dynamic. And sometimes you're left wondering, what is God doing? But you have got to know that God's got this. Everything is changing. How many times have I said it over the last 2 years? Today, everything changes. And I don't know what he's going to do, but he said that the fire of God's going to come on the rivers, and it's going to be a cleansing fire that will bring instant sanctification back to the church. Now, how many Church of God people we got here? That's one of the doctrines of the Church of God, is instant sanctification. It's one of the doctrines that separated the Church of God from the Assemblies of God, because the Church of God believed in instant sanctification. Assemblies of God believed in progressive sanctification. And so the two of them parted ways. But God's bringing instant sanctification back to the church. And then the rivers are going to connect, and a synergy will take place, and it will explode across the United States, and then north, south, east, and west to the nations. Come on, somebody. Stand with me. Now, I didn't go anywhere where I thought I was going to go, and only finished page 1. So I've got about 8 more pages that we can hit at other times. But I'm trying to emphasize the point to you that when shifts and changes come, we have to say, Lord, I don't understand, but I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do it. And you never know. How many know the story about me going to India to do the big crusade with Dr. Samuel? I go there, the big giant tent. He's got the tent already. We do the first night, and 1 or 2 people get saved. And I said, why aren't people getting saved? And he said, well, these are all Christians. I said, well, why are we doing an evangelistic crusade for all Christians? He said, well, the Hindus won't come to the tent. I said, why won't they come to the tent? He says, because it's on Christian property. They won't come on Christian property. And I go, well, why did we put a tent on Christian property? He goes, well, because they wouldn't give us permission to put it on Hindu property. So we just put it where we could. And I'm going, I've just spent thousands of dollars to come to an evangelistic crusade that no sinners are going to come to. That night, in the middle of dry season, gale force winds blow the tent down. And Dr. Samuel comes into my room the next morning. He said, the storm blew our tent down. I said, well, how long would it take to get it built back up? Could we hire extra people and rebuild it in a few hours? He said, oh, no, it takes 3 days. 3 days? We're only here for 4 nights. We won't even get it finished by the 4th night. He goes, I know. He said, just stay here. I'm going to make some calls. How many have heard this story? A few of you have. He calls a friend who runs the Hindu Civic Center. And they said, oh, we heard what happened to your tent. We will give you permission to come to Hindu Civic Center because your God wasn't able to protect you. So I preached for 3 nights in the Hindu Civic Center, and hundreds of people were born again into the kingdom of God. All because the wind blew my tent down. And all I could think about is the thousands of dollars lost and the hours and the pain and the sacrifice all wasted. You see, you can't look in the natural. You have to look in the spirit. You heard Jan's testimony about our son. We didn't know where he was. There were days go by, we didn't know if he was alive or dead. We had ways to communicate with different people that we searched. Is he in jail? Is he in a hospital? What's happened to him? I mean, we did all of that. And I'm flying to Scotland, and we get word he's been in a car accident and he's in jail, another DUI in Abilene, Texas. And we go, what is he doing in Abilene, Texas? And I call a friend. I said, Wade, do you know anybody in Abilene, Texas? He said, oh, yeah, I got a good friend, Pastor Bob. I said, would you ask him if he'd be willing to go see our son and just, find out what's going on? And my son and Pastor Bob have become very close, and Pastor Bob has helped rescue our son. Did I want him to be in jail? Did I want him to get roughed up by the police because he fought them? And did I want any of that to happen? No. But he's saved. He's clean. And he just got accepted into welding school. And they're going to pay for everything. It's $25,000 scholarship to be in welding school. When he gets out, he'll start at $30, $40 an hour. Come on. I mean, Paul will tell you he had a welding shop. There's signs up all over town. Need welders, need welders. They're in high demand. And they're willing to pay for my son to learn because they need welders. You understand God's got this? Tell your neighbor, God's got this. Lift your hands like lightning rods up to heaven. Say, Jesus, I trust you with my life. Help me. Help